Hey, Andre. I think that's only the few of us for this session. And so I'm just going to personalize it quite a bit because if you're familiar with SharePoint, what I was planning to cover, it's very, very basic. It was very, very introduction-like type of section. So might as well just skip and get straight to the user profile and get like a very personalized session. If the session and attendees change, then I might go back on track, but I think it's a nice thing to cover. All right, so the user profile service. So if you're talking on-prem, let's go ahead and let me fire up an on-premises environment that have the user profile service installed. And I know that there's two types of challenges that may come from my experience at the very least when it comes to the user profile service. The first one is the installation on brand new farms. And that can be a little bit challenging. I think, I've done hundreds of those installations, and every time it's a little bit different. Sometimes it goes very, very smooth and everything goes according to best practices and everything is fine. And sometimes it's a little bit more challenging. And I can review with you some of the pain points when it comes to installation, if it's what you're interested in. If not, the second thing to be, careful is literally when there's like type of change account, change password account, or the services for the user profile services suddenly stop running. And that doesn't happen very often, hopefully, but it's still something that when it does happen, there's a way to check whether or not we're doing, a good debugging session for that. So let me see what services I have available. So I have actually 2013 environment, and I'm going to be able to show you that. I'm just going to ask you, Andre, like what environment are you running at the minute? Is that a 2010 or 2013? And if you have any particular topic within the user profile, if not, I'm going to show you some of the stuff that I've encountered over the years. Yeah, I believe the session is recorded. And so you will have that session once we're done with it. No problem. Okay, so if there's no particular subject, I'm just going to show you a few things on the user profile service. All right, so when you're done with the installation, basically typical SharePoint farm is that you have one of your user profile services running, and that will be accessible if you have central administration rights. And what is very important is to ensure that the synchronization between your user profile service and AD is running frequently. So there's two types of synchronization that is happening. There's one incremental that is happening every day at a certain time that you fix, and then there's one recommended that is full. And this one will happen on a weekly basis. And so when it comes to like missed properties, for example, you have new user coming into the environment, being created on AD, and sometimes you don't see them, or you don't see updated properties into the SharePoint side. For example, you're using the organization chart, or you're simply pulling on from the global address directory, and you're not seeing those new properties. It might be a good idea to just restart the synchronization manually. And you would do that via the synchronization options right here and start the profile synchronization. That is the way to enforce a full or incremental synchronization if it's needed. But most of the time, that will be done through a timer job. And like I said, you have the option to do it incrementally, and you can set the time, so you can do it per minutes, per hour, per day, and then you can do a full every week. Now, remember, the more frequently you do it, the more resources it's going to take. So you have to balance that right with the resources available on your server, as well as the business requirement imposed by the business. So if your business and the manager say, hey, you know what, like we need to have some kind of, every time that we change, or we allow the user to change their information via the Active Directory, and that IT is taking care of that, it needs to be reflected within the hour. So in that case, you might want to do, an hourly sync. Now, if it's something that is a little bit more linear, I think the default value is going to be a daily value. So that way you can do that on a daily basis. Another thing that you're going to notice from the user profile services is the user property and the user profile. And that I've used that quite a bit, actually. So when you click on the user property, what it's doing is basically mapping some properties that are defined within SharePoint to properties that will be retrieved from the Active Directory. So you can map them, and most of the time, out of the box, it will map a large amount of those fields or properties automatically. But you can, if you have like a custom AD, or if you have something out of the ordinary, you can go ahead and edit those to ensure that you're mapping to the right field. So for example, let's say that you have a manager's property, which is a default AD. So we have a field or property in SharePoint called manager, and it's going to be part of the people type. That should retrieve the manager from AD that is also a default value. So when we edit that property, we're going to see that we can edit the type, or like how we want to have the value return, as well as the map property. And you can have more than just one assigned to one user profile property. So right here we have the manager's property, and right here you're going to see the mapping right here. So it's mapping directly from AD, and it's using the attribute manager, and we're doing an import. So we're basically unidirectionally pulling the data from AD into our user profile service. Now, there's a couple of interesting options under each properties. One of them that is commonly used is the ability to have the user override. And this is when you have another SharePoint feature, a large feature called the My Sites that is open. If you have that feature enabled, basically you can set whether a user can edit certain properties or not. So that way you don't have to necessarily manage it from the Active Directory. So obviously we want to keep some of the data from a direct pool from AD, especially in the context of AD being, the authentication for many business applications. But sometimes there's like things like, for example, like degrees, hobbies, interests, latest employments and stuff like that, that you don't necessarily want to manage from the AD context, but rather from the SharePoint My Site context. In that case, you have the ability to make those property available for the user, the end user, to override it. There's also privacy settings that will say, well, whether or not this information is shared, again, on the My site, whether you want that to be available to all the organization, or whether it's only available for that specific user. But most of the time, I mean, the most restrictive environment will set the editing settings to be null, basically not allowing the end user to make those modifications. And the display, like I said, like you can choose whether or not to display certain fields into the My site or the edit details page of the specific user. So that's for the managed property. So like just to recap, it's basically one field from SharePoint mapping to one field in, or one or multiple field in the Active Directory. Now, something that I use quite often to verify that the properties are properly pulled over from SharePoint or edited properly from the My site, from the end user, is basically the managed user profile. And that's going to allow you to interact with the UI directly to each and every of the profiles that sits within your user profile services. So for example, in this case, we have one called NIFTIT. And so if I find that, I'm going to be able to retrieve the account name that is relevant. And if I go and edit my profile, which is basically the same than editing the My site on the front end, I'm going to be able to see all of the properties that are currently assigned to the user, completed or not. And so you're going to see that first name, last name, names, all those default properties are pulling from the Active Directory right here. And so not all of them are displayed to everyone. Not all of them are editable by the end user. But as an admin, this is a single place where I can verify that some of the information has been updated or not. All right, let's go back to the user profile and see some of the other options that we have available. We have the ability to set up the My site, which is actually quite an interesting feature. I think that could be a whole topic by itself. But when you do set up the My site, this will be the location. So you do need to have a user profile service available, which is pretty normal because that's where all the profiles are going to be pulled from. And then after that, you will set up what we call the My site host. And the My site host will be the umbrella or the site that will allow for all of the user to access the information and also to review their colleagues and teammates' information. So to set that up, usually you would have to create on another site collection, which is preferred, a specific template site called a My site. And once you do that, basically you're going to go to your user profile and said, well, you know what? I want this specific site to be the My site host location. And from there, what it's going to do is that it's going to pull all of those people profile directly into this specific portal so that way you can review it. And all of the options right here that you have available on the My sites are related to like languages, security, permissions, newsfeed, etc. and privacy. So to give you an example, I don't know if you've seen My site or you have implemented My site. But let's go to one of them and I will go to my particular profile right here. So this is me right here. I don't have much because this is a service account for one of our clients' environments. And you're going to be able to see that when I click on About Me, which will be the same experience for everyone, I'm able to edit some of my profile information. So the email and the home phone numbers are provided information, and whatever I have set as an editable properties will be editable by the end user. So right here, the only one that I have is the picture and the one related to ask me about. So ask me about SharePoint, and ask me about Office 365, IT, development. Right here. I can go ahead and save that on. Cool. All right, so that's for the my site setting. It's pretty straightforward. The harder part for this specific task, when you do a brand new implementation or you're creating a new environment, is to make sure that the my site is going to be another site collection from your main root site collection. And you don't want the same application for both of them. So if I show you the web application, you're going to notice that under our root, we'll have separate site collection for those, and you don't want it to be a subsite of one of the main site collection. So the advice here is to separate the my site as being its own site collection. All right. What else can I show you? Oh, the organization. So you have the ability to create groups, containers for each and every one of those profiles that you have. So some things that may not be necessarily reflected on the Active Directory. For example, department might be on Active Directory. That's easy, and that's a container or a way to filter some of the user. But if there's subgroup or sub teams that exist within your organization that do need specific properties appended to it, and that you don't want to manage that via the Active Directory, or it's not justified, then the organization properties might come handy. And basically, it's just a container that will allow you to create other fields or property and assign to that larger container. Each and every user, you'll notice that have the ability to be appended to one or multiple organizations. So right now, out of the box, you only have one organization. Most of the time, everything is neatly organized in AD, but you can have, an IT, system and security teams and organization profile, and then append the specific user to that. That will regulate to your permission on SharePoint. It is meant to simplify that, or to bring up properties once again that you do not want to manage on AD but are relevant on the SharePoint environment. So I'm going to pause real quick, check the number of attendees. All right, and we have fuse, and then see if you have any question, Andre, because you're the one that asked about user profile services. Okay, good. So I'm going to show you a few more things, and then after that, I saw that we have another user on the call, and I go back to the main session. I just took a little improvisation here to show Andre the user profile service. So that's how to play with main settings, main features on the user profile service, which is quite important to retrieve and manage users' information on your SharePoint environment. But what if it doesn't sync or it breaks? So usually it's going to come from a few things. The first one is to verify that the user profile service is still running. To do that, you're going to go back into your main page for the central administration and then take a look at the services on the server. And so you're going to notice that you have two services that you should really pay attention. One is the user profile service, which is the application itself. And the second one is basically the jobs that do the synchronization with the Active Directory or whatever authentication system you have. And in this case, normally both services in the same SharePoint environment should be started. When you see them started sometimes doesn't mean that they're working. So another way to check too, and something that should be done, is to verify that the services are actually running again on the Windows services, because that's inherited from the Windows services class. And to do that, you're going to go right here into the view and make sure that the user profile service is running. Another thing that you may encounter, it's the account having a password change. So that happens quite often actually, because depending on the IT security permission that or policies that you have within your organization, you might find the user profile service account being changed of password. And in order to it won't change it automatically. You have to do it manually. So what you do is then after that, go into the properties right here and make sure that the logins right here that you set are properly set up right here. In this case, we're using the local system account, but if you're using a service account coming from AD, you have to make sure that if there's a password change or a change of the service account, that those information are changed properly. And another thing that you need to check and make sure that the service is running properly is those two services right here, the Forefront Identity Manager service and the Forefront Identity Manager Synchronization service, which is a mouthful, but basically those services, when you run the user profile services, will be started automatically. And basically that ensures the liaison between your SharePoint front-end server and the Active Directory. So all the sync or the updates or the changes will be reflected using that specific services. So it's important to verify that both of them are properly running. If those are not running, it might be because, once again, the services account used for the Forefront Identity Manager services are or expired, or there was a change, or the service account was deleted. In that case, you have to reset it up manually. Okay. So hopefully that helps. Andre, if there's any other questions, more specific to your environment, I'm happy to take them. Just let me know at the end of the session. And what I'm going to do in that case is go back to the regular part of the presentation and try to speed that up, because we already took 30 minutes on the current session. All right. So let's go back to what we were originally planning to talk about, which is SharePoint. Let me switch this right here. So for those of you that just joined, my name is Khoa, and I'm the co-founder at NIFTIT. I do those sessions every 2 weeks about, and I try to alternate the subjects. So last time we did Power BI, we did Microsoft Flow, we did a session on Office 365, on SharePoint branding, and today was really for some of my clients, to be honest, but for the community too, and people interested into what is SharePoint, what it can do, what is the terminology. Basically, very, very, very introductory session on what is SharePoint. And the first part of it was to discuss about the terminology, because when it comes to SharePoint Office 365 world, you might hear a lot of words and not necessarily use them at the same place and time. And I'm going to try to clarify that. And then after that, very basic introduction to some of the security, because after all, SharePoint is being used as, a document management system for some, business operation for other, content management system for others. But it all relies on some type of permissioning, and whether it's within the team or outside with external vendors, it is important to understand some of the basic of it. And then I'm going to go, and it's very, very basic again, on how to create some of the lists and applications and page and sites on the SharePoint environment. And then if we have time, I will complete that with a short demo. All right. So I'm going to step back a little bit and then describe what is Office 365, because some people use the term SharePoint and Office 365 interchangeably, like they mix the terms quite often, and we'll have to be very clear here. Office 365 is Microsoft's subscription platform, cloud-based tools that encompass Outlook, OneNote, Exchange, SharePoint, Access, Excel, PowerPoint, InfoPass, Power BI, Microsoft Flow. They keep adding on tools to that platform, and it's growing quite quickly. I mean, I think they are 100 million user from the latest, 4% of them on SharePoint. So it's a really growing platform, and even people that were kind of reticent or hesitant about doing the move to the cloud are now viewing, all the advantages of it when it comes to like pricing and methods. But it's basically Office 365. The term of it is basically the basket that really hold all of those tools that are cloud-based provided from the Microsoft platform. And SharePoint is just being one of those tools. And so when it comes to SharePoint, you have two flavors. And you have what we call the SharePoint Online. And so basically it's SharePoint hosted on the Office 365 environment, and that is managed by Office 365 and Microsoft team. And basically you do not have to have any server, any type of licenses. As long as you have the subscription paid with Microsoft, you have the ability to create SharePoint environment. So that's the SharePoint Online. Nothing is hosted on your environment or on your facilities. And then for some of the people that have spent the money on previous licenses of SharePoint, whether it's 2010, 2013, 2016, or that do have some regulatory policies that force them to have basically those type of system on their environment, what we will say is that they're using SharePoint on premises. That means that they purchase a license for SharePoint, they installed it on their environment, whether it's their physical server or whether it's a private cloud that they have, and they're managing the services, the storage, the database. Everything is managed from the client side. And so those are two very distinct way of approaching your journey into SharePoint. Is whether you have the ability or the need for control over the SharePoint environment, that you're going to deploy heavy business application, that you have some regulation around the content and the data that you have, or you have a specific backup policies or IT policies that require you to have SharePoint on premises, or if you're, like a small and medium businesses that just need to have the SharePoint environment running at an efficient cost, and that is 99.9 uptime. So it's really depending on you. In terms of the feature and what is the value proposition of the SharePoint environment, is that it's, mainly to hold documents. It have its own search capability that you can manage. You have compliance and heavy governance settings that you can set up within SharePoint, whether it's to, govern a set of content, or whether it's to audit your environment. And then the good thing when you go with a platform like SharePoint is that it's, heavily integrated to other Microsoft products. And the best example of it is, how it integrates with or the Microsoft Office Suite product. So whether you're on-prem or on Office 365, you will have the ability to basically upload documents and directly edit them via your browser, which is a nice feature when you have a lot of users and don't necessarily have one computer set up for all of them, or specific posts assigned for all of them, and that they need to have the information on the go. So it won't necessarily use the SharePoint technology. It will use the Microsoft Office Suite or Office Web Apps technology, but it will be a nice one unique experience into your environment, so that ensure that you don't have to go and download the documents and edit it and re-upload it, for example. But I mean, Microsoft Office Suite is one of the examples. You have plenty of other integration, whether it's via the SharePoint App Market that allows you to download free or paid app to increase your business operation, or whether it's Dynamics, MS Project Online, Access, etc. So, okay, and you're going to hear a lot about SharePoint List. So everything in SharePoint is a list. Even document libraries are in some way a list. But SharePoint List is containers for data. Like usually you would create them to host data, whether it's a business form, business requirements, contacts information, events, announcement, you name it. It's basically like having your own mini database. And so lists are very, very common into a SharePoint environment. And like you can see in this example, like everything is displayed as row, and you have the ability to edit that straight from the browser or using connection with Excel to do that. In terms of the view itself, you have the ability to search, to filter, to create your own view, to create view for the organization, to add columns, delete columns, set up a business rule for each of the columns. So it's a pretty powerful tool, and it can be used in a variety of fashion. And the second item, very popular too, is a document library, which is a boost-up list, because basically not only it stores data or metadata associated to document, but the documents themselves. So whether it's folder, PDF, images files, Office documents file, you will be able to store them on the SharePoint environment and manage the permission and search them and create views, etc. So the main advantages on SharePoint lists and document libraries to go with a platform like SharePoint is not only the views, not only the ability to create data, metadata, and columns, but also to run workflows that will interact with that data. So, example, you upload a document and it needs a 3-tier approval stage before it's published to the entire organization. That's something that is easily configurable within the SharePoint environment, because those workflows are already provided. All you need to do is assign a specific workflow to a specific document library or list. And one of the key features too is definitely the auditing power of it. You're going to be able to know from an administration level how many files you have, how many of those have been touched in the last year. There's a lot of retention and governance that can be done around those files. So obviously, as IT administrator or Office 365 administrator, when you have information that is important for the organization, to being able to quickly turn out those reports and give them to the C levels is definitely a key asset. All right, SharePoint apps. I did mention about those earlier, and basically those are small, tiny applications that can be installed in your SharePoint environment since the 2013 version on premises and always on the online version. And those are sometimes free, sometimes you have to pay for those, sometimes you have to do subscription model on those. But basically, they will give you added value to specific user or to the entire organization. And it varies. It can be productivity tools, it can be projects, it can be, fun little tools, it can be FAQ. So you have a lot of those application available with a single click for the administrator to install into your SharePoint environment. And of course, there's much more. I can't cover everything in normally an hour session, but like here, 30 minutes. And you're going to have like views, workflow, alerts and notification, versioning, check-in, check-out, the notion of content type of site column, term store management and such. So if you have any specific question or you've heard about those or you want to implement those within your organization, just shoot me a message at the end of the session. I'd be happy to do one-on-one or discuss via email. All right. And so let me check real quick how we're doing on time. Oops. Okay, so we're good. Oops. Good. Where am I? Okay, good. All right, so SharePoint security. That could be a 4-hour webinar by itself. So I'm just going to simplify it to the 5 minutes version of it. But basically, the main strength of SharePoint is the ability for it to be very granular in terms of permissioning of security when it comes to the data hosted on SharePoint. And what you have to think about when you implement the SharePoint permission is what you're going to secure, so the secureable object, who's going to have access to it, and what kind of level of permission you're going to provide to them. And so the secureable objects is basically anything from folders to library to the site itself. Who am I, what am I trying to secure right here? Then you're going to give people, whether it's SharePoint groups, and SharePoint groups are created within SharePoint, and you can add as many users as you want, or specific user, or Active Directory group. And so you're going to decide, well, you know what? This is the secureable object. This is the site that I want to secure. And I'm going to only give access to John Doe or to an Active Directory group called marketing at contourso.com. And the permission is something that you want to reflect. And there's a lot more permission available than the 3 mentions here. But mainly what you want to separate is 3 groups. Read, or what we call visitors, contribute, as we call contributors, and full control, which will be your administrator. And so read is very simple. It's like people can access the site, the object, the library, the list, but that's all they can do. Is that they can read the information and they cannot interact with it, they cannot edit it, they cannot delete it, right? Contributor is a level above, and those are the people that, if given to the wrong people, could do a little bit of damage because they have the ability to edit, they have the ability to delete, and they have the ability to change some of the structure of that particular site, library, or item. And then the top level is the full control level, and that will give you an extra layer because basically you can manage some of the permission given to you with that, and you're able to edit, add application, edit, add columns, and create content types. And those, again, have to be placed in the hands of people that have a little bit of training or understanding over the SharePoint platform. So what I've seen is most of the time, not bad implementation, but it's a free for all. It's basically we have SharePoint and we start using it, and it's not really into the hands of IT because as long as they installed it, they don't really care what happened to it after that, and the end user are not properly trained or don't have full interest of managing that data. And so here are like 5 little tips that hopefully can help improve that security over the SharePoint environment. It's not perfect. Usually, I think people have to be committed to secure and ensure proper governance over their platform and over that data, but it should definitely help improve the situation. So the first one, and that's for IT, is to use group to manage user. What I mean by that is that what I've seen is usually items, lists, library, or site being given individual permission. I give it to John Doe and Jane Doe and John Smith. And when it comes time to audit that, it's not really practical. It can be pretty laborious eventually. I mean, you have to run some script to do that. And it's definitely a lot easier to have a group, an AD group, and have all of the user classified there, marketing group and the IT group and the C-level and whatnot, and then give those group permission to share. That means that if there's any changes that needs to happen, then the IT team is responsible for that by adjusting the group at the Active Directory layer or the Office 365 layer. And then one of the key things too is to avoid document or item level permission. That means, once again, SharePoint is very granular. You could have a site with access to everyone, and then have a document library with access to a few. And then within that document library, have items listed for even a subset of that group. It's definitely very, very common, but it's something to try to avoid. If you can do separate document libraries with separate permission, it's definitely a more recommended approach. There is a feature called Share, and it's pretty easy actually. On all the files and all the documents, you will have the ability to click on that button and it automatically shares to whoever you want. It have to be used with care. You have to be a little careful when you do that, because when you share that, when it comes time to audit once again and know what was shared with whom, that share button can have devastating damages, because it can be very, very tricky to go back and see what document, even if you created very specific permission on that document library, a specific document could have been shared 1,000 times with 1,000 different users. That's the fourth one is Microsoft guidance too, and I think it works the best. It's really to give single admin for each site collection, meaning that for each site that you have within SharePoint, you have a single admin. So that way it's the person that will be, taking a decision for the entire group. And hopefully that person is knowledgeable about what they're doing. That's the person that will give permission. That's the person that will add add-ons and applications, for example, or create policies for the entire group. So having a single admin, a single point of contact for each of the site collections is definitely recommended. And once again, I've mentioned it plenty of time over the last 4 points is, to have the audit, to have the security, to really invest into that, because you don't want to have some of the data shared with partners, with third party, and never being traced back and being still available to, employees that have left the organization or people that should not have access to that. And so doing regular audit is something that definitely help that direction, help taking proactive measure. So I'm being signaled that we're out of time, so I'm going to leave with that. Actually, it was time for the demo. I'm going to jump back into the session and see if there's any questions for me. Okay, so there's a question from Ben, and it says, should I use list or library to store document? Definitely libraries. Libraries are meant to store, files. And the list is really just to store data. So my recommendation is definitely to use library to store those documents that you have. Any other question at the minute? For those that join, feel free to use the chat box on the webinar jam session to type your question. Be more than happy to take them. All right. Feels like no question at this point. So yeah, I wanted to finish by thanking you to join us. Like I said, I do those sessions on a regular basis. So if you have a specific subject, not that I know all of them, but sometimes I'm happy to research and work on some of those new tools from Office 365. But if you have any particular subject that you would like me to treat, whether it's SharePoint or Office 365, I'd be more than happy to take your comments. Just send us an email and say, hey, you know what, I would like to do a session on this or that. And once again, we take that into consideration. I will probably do another session on SharePoint basics, and this time pushing a little bit more on the demo, but we had a little late start and I deviated on user profile for a little bit. But next time, yeah, I try to make sure that we stay on focus and that we'll review a bit more and understand a little bit more on SharePoint. With that being said, the video will be sent out. If you have any other question, I'm available, Twitter, Facebook, email. And until then, I wish you a great rest of your day. Thank you again for coming, and I'll talk to you soon. Have a good one.